is that there are over 33 billion. What we often miss is that there are over 33 billion chickens. There are over 1.5 billion cattle, over 1 billion goats and sheep. And all these dudes, human beings, livestock, need to eat. What do they eat? Food. And that tells you the level of opportunity that is in the global food system. So you always look at what are the challenges and what are the opportunities. You put these numbers together, then you're looking at something nearly about 50 billion lives to be fed. That is an opportunity. Unfortunately, in our case, in the Africa and Caribbean, that seems to be a problem. It is how do we reframe this problem into opportunities? And that is why understanding the global agri-food chain is very, very important so that we pinpoint the opportunities right from the production side into the processing, distribution, and to the final consumption part. David, let's move to the next slide.
Okay.
All right, we can skip to this, to the next one as well.
This one or the next?
Yeah, let's skip to the next one. I can skip from there. Yes.
Okay.
Now, if you look at this this visual, it highlights the level of import dependence of especially African and Caribbean countries. Nearly about between 60 to 75% of food that we consume is imported. That is a big problem. And we saw how complicated this could get when there are disruptions, as we saw in COVID. When you have big producers or big food exporters like India, like Vietnam, like the United States, restricting exports of staples that we eat, which are the source of calories in African and Caribbean. When they restrict exports, what it means is that we have to starve. But should that be the case? Don't we have the factor conditions locally to transform these challenges into prosperity? We do have. We've got the land, we've got the climate, and we've got the people. What we lack is the vision. And that is what we want to rethink, or we need to rethink. That yes, we are importing nearly about 75% of our food consumption from outside our region, most significantly. How do we transform that? Then let's move to the next one. Okay. Now, I would like us to take 2 or 3 examples of staples, which are the biggest source of our food across these regions. The corn value chain. And this slide brings across different narratives. It is just corn that we produce locally. We consume some locally. Do we add value to it? Rarely do we add value to it. Do we import corn into these 2 regions? Yes, we do import corn into these regions. Can we develop the productive capabilities in our regions to do that? We've got the fertile land, we've got the weather to be able to do that. But beyond just produce it, when you produce corn, just consume it and maybe export across the borders, you're missing opportunity. If you look at the slide, just from the corn, there are different industries that can be developed out of corn. Beyond our daily consumption, it is a source of animal feed. And that is why I started with that first point. Nearly about 3 billion combination of cattle and goats. Their feed is prepared from corn. Nearly 35 billion portion for chicken. Their feed is prepared from corn. So just by enhancing your productive capabilities in corn, you are able to set up an animal feed industry relevant for the local consumption as well as for export. The corn oil, which is a sort of cooking oil that we use. These countries, or Afro-Caribbean countries, import cooking oil. Don't we have what it takes to do that? Now, what we seek to point out is that by developing our productive capabilities locally, one, on the production side, two, understanding that we need to develop the value chain. We create all these industries: corn sugar, corn syrup, corn starch. It can be used for laundry starch, for textile sizing, for clothing, for cake, for soap industry. So just by the ordinary corn that we know, there are a series of opportunities that can be created out of that. Dave, let's move to the next slide. Okay. And then is the soy industry or soybeans industry. Both regions have got country that has huge capabilities to be significant producers of soybeans. Why are we not doing that? Lack of vision and prioritization. Now, it is important for us to understand, if a country or the region becomes very intentional in developing domestic capabilities for soybean production, what sort of opportunities are unpacked just from soybeans? It is the biggest source of meat alternative for the vegan industry, which is growing globally. These days, sausage and vegan sausages are made from soybean. It is a big source of industry for the beverage and the food industry. For soy milk, for yogurt, for flour, also for cooking oil, for the making of plastics, for the making of ties, for making of paint, for biofuel, just soybeans. Now, unpacking this array or these array of opportunities is what should tell us that this is a priority that our governments and investors should be aware of. Dave, let's move to the next one. Okay. Now, we've looked at two key staples, which are corn and soya, but I want us to delve deeper into an area which I call my comfort, and that is the cocoa sector. This visual is for anyone. I don't think there's anyone in Africa or Caribbean that doesn't know what cocoa pod looks like. So that is an image of cocoa pod to the left, but to the right, what you see there is the price performance of cocoa on the global market. This chart puts together all traded commodities, indices, be it metals, be it softs, and indices, as well as currencies. On top of it is cocoa. So in 2024, between the 1st of January and 31st December 2024, the price of cocoa jumped by not 50%, by not 100%, but by 820%. And that surpasses the cumulative of any other indices, including Bitcoin. That exposes us to the level of opportunities that are in these sectors. What if African and Caribbean countries have invested so much in improving their volumes, in increasing their volumes of this wonderful crop that God has blessed us with? For any crop to perform 820% within a given year, that is unimaginable. It has never happened in the ag sector. So this is to give us an idea of the performance of the cocoa sector. Dave, let's move on to the next. Now to the next slide, I want us to have an understanding of what is the structure of the cocoa value chain, who is making what, and where do we sit, especially as African and Caribbean countries, because both regions are producers of cocoa. The global cocoa value chain is valued as around 150 billion US dollars annually. This visual breaks a bar of chocolate and reveals to us who gets what out of the $150 billion. The biggest gainers are those who don't have cocoa, who don't manufacture chocolate, and they are the retailers. They are the Walmart, they are the Aldi, they are the Lidl, they are the Tesco's, they are the Waitresses. Next to them are chocolate manufacturers. The Mars, the Mondelez, and others, they make 35% of the value of chocolate. Processing companies make nearly about 8%. And producers make just about 7%. And that includes Ghana, Cote d'Ivoire, Nigeria, Dominican Republic, Grenada, as they hinted earlier, Jamaica, and others. All cocoa producers make just about 7% of the global value chain of cocoa. Is that what we deserve? No. Is that what we want? No. So we need to reframe our vision to say that how do we transition from being farmers to also take part in these spaces? That is by having some processing capabilities, having some manufacturing capabilities, as well as investing in the retail space. Dave, let's move on to the next slide. Because we're talking about trade, it's also very important to have an understanding of what are the trade flows. Where is what moving to? When we talk about cocoa, we do know the beans. That's the raw cocoa beans. There's the second layer of what we call derivative. That's when processing is done. David, pardon me. I know there's a lot of noise from my side. Yeah, with London police having too many vehicles to be creating noise. Right. So this shows us where cocoa moves from and where does it go. So to the left, you have the export points. That's the origination. You've got big countries like Ghana, Cote d'Ivoire. In the Caribbean, Dominican Republic is the largest cocoa exporter from that region. But ironically, there are Western countries that are also big exporters of cocoa, and the Netherlands is one of them. Belgium is one of them. What happened? African countries largely send a chunk of their raw cocoa beans to these two countries and get re-exported to other parts of the world. But that is not the issue. The issue is, whereas African countries are big exporters of raw cocoa beans, the biggest exporter of cocoa mass or cocoa liquor and cocoa butter, which are the most valued products, especially butter. So if the price of cocoa beans is about $10,000, the price of butter could be $20,000 or even more. Now, the biggest exporter of cocoa beans is Ghana, Cote d'Ivoire, and Ghana. But the biggest exporter of cocoa butter is the Netherlands. The biggest exporter of chocolate is Germany, Belgium, Canada, Poland. These are the biggest exporters of the highly valued products. We need reframing. By understanding these opportunities, that tells us that we need to reframe and have a bigger vision by integrating into other parts of the chain. Dave, let's move to the next slide. Right, this slide just gives us some explanation of how the cocoa value chain looks, where the production side, the trade side, the processing through to the marketing and the retail. I don't think we need to spend too much time on this slide. Right. Now, having identified the opportunities, or having one, we know the challenges. Two, this is the size of the market. Then you ask yourself, as a potential investor, which part of the chain do I fix myself? And I bring up this slide to show us the investment opportunities within the value chain. And that is where the processing, the chocolate manufacturing happens. So within the cocoa process, you've got the added value, which is cocoa mass or cocoa liquor. Then we have the cocoa butter, without which you cannot make chocolate. Cake, which is used in making ice cream, in making cookies, in making muffins, for a lot of other, for hot chocolate and others. Then we have the cocoa powder alkalization. We've got a natural cocoa powder, which is light brown in nature, but by alkalization, you can move a natural cocoa powder into 5, 10 different variations. If you take the example of Oreo, Oreo looks black, but that is made from cocoa powder, which is alkalized. Now you could go to a very good restaurant, they serve you with a dessert, and the dessert looks so cute and reddish brown. That is made from cocoa powder, but the cocoa powder has been alkalized. So we are unpacking these things for us in the diaspora as investors to understand that there are a lot of opportunities in the cocoa value chain and chocolate manufacturing, as we do know. Then also has to do with the upcycling opportunities. The cocoa pulp that David used to suck back in the days has now been turned into an asset. So you have cocoa beverages being made from the cocoa pulp. You've got cocoa water. It's also used in the cosmetic industry. And most importantly, artisanal chocolate making has become so simple that you can start manufacturing chocolate in a 3x3 apartment. You don't need to have a huge manufacturing installment to have to do chocolate manufacturing. And that is what we seek to unpack. There's a big value out there, 150 billion, exponential growth. There are opportunities for everyone to go in there. And that is what we seek to unveil through this this part of the presentation. David, let's right. Now we ask ourselves, okay, why are these relevant to us as diasporans? Because we hold the firepower. 100 billion worth of remittances annually into Africa, about 20 billion into the Caribbean. And this is just what we are remitting. Now I ask David and myself, when we remit 100 billion, how much do we have in our account here sitting in the UK? So the diaspora has so much firepower to unlock. Rather than allowing our government to be going out there seeking for aid without understanding, because they don't hold the capital, they don't even have the negotiation power. But we have the investment acumen. We hold the funds. Anybody who is able to, a group of people who are able to send 120 billion to African Caribbean, have 5-fold of these in their destination, in their resident countries. And that is the fact. A certain number comes out that African and Caribbean countries hold more than 600 billion pounds worth of cash sitting in Western banks. What are we using with those funds? That's the same fund that have been loaned to our government one way or the other. Now it is our job to identify the opportunities in there. In the food sector is the number one, because nearly about 20 to 35% of our population are employed within the food sector. Worst case scenario, in other countries, about 60, 70%. About 25% of our GDP comes from the agricultural sector. If there's any area worthy of investment, it is the agricultural sector. If you understand that the rate of return or the rate of the ROI, return on investment in the agricultural sector is massive, but you need to understand the chain. And that is why this exchange or this platform created by ACSIS is very, very important. Dave, let's move on to the next. But I think it's important also to look at what's Dave, just quickly back to that slide. Yeah, we've highlighted on the actual remittances in 2023. I didn't want to use 2024 because the figures for 2024 are not finalized yet. But the projection for 2025 is looking at something in excess of about 140 billion for the two regions. For Africa, we can say that North Africa, especially dominate. Egypt controls about 30 to 40% of remittance into Africa. But there's a huge potential for both regions to unleash their firepower, both through the remittances and also what we are keeping and earning less than 2 or 3% in an ISA here in the UK. It doesn't make any sense. Let's move on there. Right. And I think I did highlight this thing earlier. That's when you look at the value chain approach. If you take cocoa, the dominant use for cocoa is in the chocolate industry. Cocoa powder is known for its medicinal benefit. So there's a huge demand within these key sectors. We haven't mentioned even the candy sector, the sweet and snack sector. For these days, you can easily mix corn and chocolate into snack. You can easily mix plantain and chocolate into a snack. And by investing in this value chain, these opportunities are unlocked. Chocolate, beauty industry, and a lot of others. If you take the cashew industry, the same thing. Snack, animal feed, oil industry, even the ethanol for energy. You take the corn and soy industry, beyond feeding over 40 billion cumulative of human beings and animals. It is an opportunity for the oils, for vegetable oils or for cooking oils, for starch and for ethanol. And as I indicated, an investment in the agribusiness sector within 3 to 5 years unlocks between 15 to 25% return on investment annually. And that is what we are missing. So it is important for us to prioritize investment in the agricultural sector. David, let's move on. Okay. Now, in conclusion, agriculture is not just a sector. And from what we have seen since I started the presentation, it is a strategic pathway to economic prosperity. Why is that the case? 99% of countries globally industrialize with agriculture as the basis, with the exception of Singapore, Hong Kong, and the UAE. And Singapore and Hong Kong were intentionally created. And that is why having a vision is very, very important. We need to have a vision for our agricultural sector. And that is the only way we can unlock this path to economic prosperity. Agri-value chains offers the greatest pathway to diversify our economies, create prosperity, and long-term economic resilience. In conclusion, I call on all of us, and then we go to the next slide. I call on all of us as Africans and Caribbeans in the diaspora, and also those resident in our regions. Let's turn food into power, trade into prosperity, and diaspora into action. The African and Caribbean diaspora must play a catalytic role, not just an investor, but as visionaries. The experience you have, David, myself, David, and a lot of others, you have a wealth of experience because you have the opportunity for understanding what happens in our origin countries and what happens in that market, in other markets. How do we build the bridge? And that bridge is the path to opportunities. And that is what I leave us this with us this afternoon. The food sector is being narrated as a challenge. Let's reframe that and call that an opportunity to drive prosperity in Africa and the diaspora. Thanks so much for your time.
Fantastic. Absolutely astounding information there, Fuad. I really appreciate
Well, I've got my LinkedIn and others on the next page. So what is good for audience to see the thank you.
Right.
Exactly.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, thank you, Fuad, for that very enlightening presentation. There's a lot that you've unpacked to bring us into the light in terms of what's happening around the world, particularly in Africa. And I'm particularly astounded by the amount of money the diaspora has in terms of our remittances and what we can do as a people. So without taking up too much time, because we have lost some time here, I'd like to invite the audience for their questions. We have 10 to 15 minutes of questions, so the floor is now open. You can either put your questions in the chat, or if you prefer, you can raise your hand. We have our first question. Misai, go ahead.
Greetings, everyone. Wonderful presentation of the little piece that I got. Greetings, David. My quick question is: you mentioned cocoa can be used to make water. Could you expand on that a little bit, please? Speaker.
Right, thank you. Dave, would you pick the questions before I answer, or that should proceed with it?
Yeah, she basically said that you mentioned that cocoa could be used to make water, and she'd like you to
Yeah,
expand
no,
on
that's
it.
fine. I wanted to know whether you want to pick one or few questions, or I can proceed with the answer.
Oh, I see. No, just go ahead as they come. As they come, just respond.
Okay, I didn't get her name. She should pardon me for that. I always love it when I
Yeah.
know the name so that I can personalize that. But thanks for the question. Yes, so previous or in the past, I mean, as we all grew up in the cocoa region, the cocoa pulp, when you break the cocoa pod, there's a white pulp that surrounds the beans. In the past and till date, it's something that goes to waste. It's allowed to just go waste. Now a company has innovated, I think it started with the Cocoa Research Institute. That pulp is not allowed to go to waste. It is stored. So when they break the pod, that pulp is then stored in a different bucket, crystallized or purified, and then mixed with water. So there are concentrated juice that are made purely from the cocoa pulp. So it is from the cocoa pulp juice, or from the cocoa pulp that juice is extracted. It can be used purely for juice. It can also be mixed to make cocoa water. But funny to say, beyond that, it also serves as a sugar replacement. So if you take a look at the Lind's chocolate, Lind has got this chocolate called 85% pure.
Yes.
The sugar in there is not sugar, or the sweet in there is not sugar. It's made from the cocoa pulp that has been crystallized into sugar. So it just tells you that the cocoa is not just about the beans. There's so much value. Even the cocoa pod, that is the cloth surrounding the cocoa, is used for animal feed and also for as fertilizer. The cocoa bean itself, there's something that surrounds the shell. The shell is used as biofuel and also sometimes as animal feed. So there are a lot of opportunities that are in there that we miss just because we don't understand it. And two, we are not intentional about appreciating the value in some of these things.
That is amazing. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Okay, next question. Come on, don't be shy. We're all friends here.
Hello, can I ask a question then?
Absolutely.
Hi, good afternoon, Fuad. Pardon me if I pronounce your name incorrectly.
That's 100% correct.
Yeah, that's correct. Okay, thank you so much for this wonderful presentation. It was great insight. And what I would like to know is, at ground level, what do you think we can do here in the UK to make a difference to what's happening? I understand that you need investment money, but aside from us working to get that investment money to, build infrastructure, build plants, make a real difference at an industrial level, what can we do at ground level? The reason why I asked that, just for some background information, is I have a brand. I'm looking to source chocolate products for my brand, but I found it quite challenging to find the right organizations to work with in places such as Ghana, where we can very quickly get a deal made and get the products over. So that's my question to you. Hope that makes sense.
Yes, I mean, that makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. And graciously, you found one. So I'm Ghana Cocoa based here in the UK. If you need cocoa products from Ghana, then I'm one of the people that you can reach out to. But most importantly, to answer your question, it doesn't necessarily require an industrial skill for us, especially in the diaspora, to be able to unlock some of these opportunities. What we want to see is, and as I indicated in my concluding remarks, how do we build the bridge? And that bridge is a part of opportunity. Now we have the back end, which is the origination of these products. We want to see a lot of people or diasporans in the UK going into the chocolate business. Here in the UK, the UK is the second largest chocolate market in Europe. It's the third largest chocolate market in the world. The UK imports lots of chocolate. Next to the United States, the next biggest importer of chocolate is the UK. And there is a lot of opportunities. Unfortunately, they import from Europe. What happens is that we send the cocoa to Europe, especially Netherlands and Belgium. It got processed there and also into Switzerland, Poland. And then the chocolate moves and Spain, and the chocolate moves to the UK. Why are we not understanding the nuances of this business? And that is why I met up with David, and I said, Dave, I saw the earlier exchange, but why are we not discussing anything about cocoa and about food? Because I believe that is where the opportunity lies. Now, what we can do is to fall back or build that bridge with our peers and our connections back in these producing countries, be it in Jamaica, in Grenada, in Trinidad and Tobago, in Dominican Republic, in Ghana, in Nigeria. We are in the consuming market. We are close to the cash. And I like that, because that is where the supermarket chain is. And we need to be part of that. You don't need to set up a Tesco to be part of them and the retailers. Being part of the retailers basically means that you are also facing directly with the final consumer who is eating the chocolate. So we want to see a lot of African diasporan chocolate brands made here in the UK. And Chairman, I'll disclose it. You don't need to even set up your own production facility to do that. There are contract manufacturers here in the UK. When you see Tesco Lidl chocolate, they don't make it. There are independent manufacturers where you go to them, sit down with them, that I want to develop a chocolate brand. And this is the kind of recipe I want. I want 70% dark, I want 30% cocoa content in it. They do the pricing for you. You come up with the packaging design. So you just said your job is to market and interface with the consumer. You pay them for them to do those services for you. And for me, that is what I will always entreat and advise us in the diaspora to focus on. I don't call that value addition, I'll call that value capture, because there's so much value in consumer market, especially in the UK. Let's capture some of the value.
Mm-hmm.
Fantastic. Charmaine, you good?
I'm good. I've just linked with you on LinkedIn because I'd like to continue the conversation, if that's okay.
That's perfect.
All right, fantastic. Well, thank you very much for those questions. That's all we can take now before we introduce David. So I am going to bring David in. Let me see. So David is the agricultural economist out of Trinidad and Tobago. And I'd let him do the introduction because, you know, he's an amazing youngster. He's doing great things. And David, over to you.
Thank you so much, Chair. A pleasant good morning to everyone. My name is David Forgenie, and I see on my slide has PhD there. I don't want to confuse. I'm not a PhD yet. I'm a PhD candidate, so I don't want to misrepresent myself in any way, right? I'm an agricultural economist and food trade researcher in the Caribbean region, and I focus on food import demand and demand analysis and food trade policy, with a specific focus on meat and seafood products that are imported within the Caribbean. So I hope that my presentation today, I'm going to share one of my papers that I published recently. I'm going to share the results of that because I think it's very interesting, especially like I heard the previous presenter said that about 60 to 70% of food that is consumed is imported, but I don't know if that is from the African side because I know it's much higher within the Caribbean. It's actually 80 to 90% of the food that we consume in the Caribbean region is imported. So this is a major problem because, you know, we are exposed to outside shocks. We become very vulnerable. And one of those shocks that we had recently, in most recent time, would have been the COVID-19 pandemic. So that is what this study would have been focusing on, is looking at the welfare implications or impacts that Caribbean consumers incurred from the first year of the COVID-19 pandemic and some other price shock scenarios. So, Chair, I know that you are sharing the slide, but I have some transitions in my slide, meaning that I have some diagrams that are behind others that I need to, you know, share my slide. So, would you permit me to share my slide, or is that?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll stop sharing and then you can go ahead and share.
Yeah, I'm very sorry. I know you had this. I didn't know this in the beginning, so I thought I was sharing my slide, so I created it as a more of an interactive slide. So,
All right. We're very flexible on this platform. So
yeah. So thank you so much for giving me that opportunity. Yeah, could you see my slide?
yep.
Yeah. Sorry, I usually just do these little transition stuff. So all of all of the introductions are already given. So this is just an outline of the presentation, and I'll get right into it. So Caribbean nations are usually classified as net food importers in that we import more than we actually export, right? In order to consume, especially when it comes to food. We import around 80 to 90% of the food that we consume within the Caribbean region. And in 2023, as we see here from this graph, we see that the food import bill, which is the total value of food that is being imported within the region, is increasing each year, reaching as high as $6 billion US in 2023. Right. And in addition, in 2023, 13 Caribbean nations imported around 5.88 million tons of food, which amounts to around $6 billion US. And this data actually comes from FAO, right? So in 2023, now in terms of the composition of the imported food, we can see that according to data from 2023, cereals accounted for about 35% of all the food that is imported within the region here, and that is made up of our unprocessed cereals and processed cereals, and also meat, which is in terms of per capita consumption, is actually increasing within the Caribbean region. About 17.2% of all imports is from meat and seafood products within the region. In terms of dairy accounts for about 13%, and vegetables is about 10.2%. And a survey conducted by CARICOM and CDEMA and the World Food Program actually found that about 57% of the English-speaking population, which is about 5.7 million people, was classified as food insecure, or they do not have enough food to consume. Most of the times when people think about food security or food insecurity, like we think about people say, well, oh, we have enough food to eat, but it goes beyond that. Do we have nutritious food to consume? And that is one of the problems that we have within the region. That is the food, we might have food to eat on a plate, but is that food safe and nutritious? Is that food meeting the daily dietary requirements, not just of a specific person, but of a specific group? Because different groups of people would have different dietary requirements. The dietary requirements of a pregnant person is different from a person who is doing construction or a farmer, right? So that is what food security takes into consideration here. Now, why is this food import a problem? Because one would argue and say, well, you know, countries of the world can't import all what we want. Produce all what we need, so we need to import, which is good. But the reason why it is a problem, I will show you just now, is that with increasing population and decreasing domestic production within the region, it is likely projected that food import demand will continue to increase. Why this is a problem? well, after the over the last 2 decades, world food prices has seen major fluctuations. And this here is the FAO world food prices. And this is now looking at the spike areas is where we have increases in food prices here, right? Now, increase in world food prices would mean, excuse me?
Fuad?
Oh,
Okay, go ahead.
yeah, the
Sorry.
spikes that we are seeing here is times when we had major spikes in world food prices, meaning that food was relatively more expensive to import, right? And we will see why this is a problem more just now, right? So we can see that we had a spike between 2006 to 2008, and then we had another spike here between 2010 and 2011. And most recently, during the first year of the COVID-19 pandemic, look at that, food prices went up here for all imported food products. And this has serious implications for welfare because now people are paying more for food. And think of a budget when income remains the same, right? When your income remains the same and now something in that basket that you are paying for has become more expensive. Now you have to substitute away from other commodity groups or consumption groups and now in order to consume food. And we know that food is a necessity. So when the prices increase globally, right, people might now substitute away, and research has shown that when prices of food increases or when we have some type of price increase, things like healthcare, right, expenditure on healthcare goes out the window. So you mightn't going to the dentist more often, you mightn't pay to go to the gyms more often, and all these things are needed in order to live a healthy life, So this is troubling when food prices increase. So in terms of the objective of this study, what this study seeked to do was to assess the welfare impact of increasing price of imported food on Caribbean consumers using a technique called compensating variation. And this is just putting a monetary value to that price increase. How does that translate to an impact? Now, a brief of the methodology, because the methodology includes a lot of mathematical modeling. So just a brief overview on that, just so, for transparency. The method that was used here is a method to calculate something called compensating variation. And compensating variation is basically a measure of welfare. So it looks at an impact basically and assign a monetary value to that impact because people understand things when you talk about dollars and cents. If you tell people, oh, it has negatively impacted, what they want to hear is how much dollars did we lose? How much money did we lose? Or how much did this cost? What does this mean? People understand more. So this is just a fancy formula here just to calculate compensating variation. And this formula goes on. Now, I looked at receiving some of the other parameters using a model called the almost ideal demand system model. Again, you don't have to worry about the mathematical stuff in there. It's just formalities here. So these are the modeling. What was important here, I had to get these things called elasticities. Now, elasticities are really policy relevant because what they do is that they look at when prices change, how consumers adjust their demand for their quantity demanded for a product. So that is what I needed to get here. So if I had a 5% increase in import prices, how much would consumers decrease their consumption by? And we already know we have a food security problem. So if we have prices increasing, consumers decreasing what they are buying, then we can see how that translates to being like something bad within the region. Right? So what I did was that I defined 3 price shock scenarios. And the first set of price shock scenarios I call the world food price crisis. So if you go back and look at that graph I would have created before, I will show with the food price spikes, we'd have seen we had a spike between 2006 to 2008 and 2010 to 2011. And the literature has deemed this the world food price crisis. So I looked at that, and then the third scenario was the COVID-19 pandemic. I looked at the first year of the COVID-19 pandemic when we had lockdowns and prices of food was increasing globally. So I looked at what was the welfare impact there. Now I could have gone on more, but the data was not available at that point in time when I was doing this study. So I just did the first year. In terms of the data that it covered 15 Caribbean countries, and it was based on data availability. The commodity groups that I looked at was dairy and eggs, fats and oils, fruits and vegetables, meat and seafood together, and staples and cereals. When I talk about staples and cereals, I'm not talking about breakfast cereals because a lot of people think I am. I'm actually talking about rice and flour and these things, root crops, pulses. So that's what I'm talking about when I call it staples and cereals. Sugar and honey, spices and tea, and beverages, both alcoholic and non-alcoholic. And just interestingly, the consumption of sweetened and sugary beverages within the Caribbean region has actually been increasing in recent times. So that is another problem by itself because, we have an onset of diabetes and things within the region. So people are actually consuming more, but that is a conversation for another time. But I thought it might have been interesting for you to know that. The data that was sourced is all publicly available on these websites, FAO-Stat, Fish.J, and the World Bank. So all the data is out there. My results was the first thing we needed to get was these things called elasticities. And again, as I said, elasticities are policy relevant tools in that they look at how does demand respond, quantity demanded fall when you have a price increase. So let's take this one here. Let's take cereals. If we go across the cereals is negative 0.21. And think about it as the smaller the number, the less responsive consumer quantity demanded is to changes in the prices. So we could see that this figure is 0.21, meaning with a 1% increase in import prices leads to a 0.21% fall in quantity demanded of cereals and staple products on average. And this is over the study period. So we can see here that cereals are not very responsive to changes in import prices. And this is not surprising at all because within the region, I could speak for Trinidad and Tobago, we don't produce a lot of cereals, right? Like rice and these things. But we do consume a lot of it. If you look at the Caribbean plate is made up of nearly 60% when we eat mostly, a lot of rice and flour and things like that. So this is not surprising at all that increases in prices doesn't lead to a drastic decrease in quantity demanded for some cereals. For meat and seafood, on the other hand, we could see it's very responsive. So a 1% increase in the import price of meat and seafood is expected to lead to a 1.4% decrease in the amount of meat and seafood that is being imported within the region. One would say that we might, these commodities are highly elastic or very responsive to changes in prices. Prices here. This one is beverages and both alcoholic and non-alcoholic. So we can see again, it's very responsive as well. Interestingly, fruits and vegetables are very responsive. We don't want that, right? That's of concern because we know that consuming fruits and vegetables, we know is needed for a healthy lifestyle, right? But look at this. When the prices increase, we actually decrease in our demand by a lot, almost close to a 1-to-1, almost. So these are commodity groups that we would want to pay attention to. And these are actually lacking for the region. Most studies look at food import demand. They tell you the amount that is imported and things like that. But we need these elasticities because with elasticities, we can do a lot of things. We can do, as I would show just now, we could calculate how does demand respond. We could calculate welfare impacts and these things. So again, the price shocks that were what that was determined was these spikes here. This first spike you're seeing here, this second spike, and this third spike all the way up here. These are what I call the price shock scenarios. And for our commodity groups, we can see here over the specific periods, each bar here represents a specific time period, and we have a specific price increase in terms of a percentage. So we can see here that fats and oils during the first year of the COVID-19 pandemic experienced the most increase in import prices here. And that was followed by our dairy and eggs, and also our meat and seafood, and our staples and cereals. And as I said before, within the Caribbean region, we import nearly about 35% of imports is made up of food imports, sorry, is made up of cereals and staples. And look at the price hikes here. So all of these commodities had price increases over, especially the first year of the COVID-19 pandemic. So just a bit of going back a bit, looking at the annual food consumption expenditure for these specific years. So these were what the expenditures look like, meaning the amount of money that we are paying to import food within the region. So we can see that cereals and staples, of course, each year or during each period had the highest expenditure share here. Of food imports. That is followed by our meat and seafood, and again, our fruits and vegetables here. Trends in meat and seafood and beverage and fats and oil suggest it would increase further within the near future, or continue to increase every year. And I see that with cereals and staples, for example, because we don't produce much of it, but we consume a lot of it. So we need to pay attention to these commodity groups. Now, in terms of the welfare losses that occurred, sorry, during the first year of the COVID-19 pandemic and during the food price crisis, we had during the first food price crisis, which is 2006 to 2008, over that period, we had about US 540 million US dollars being lost. And this is average because this was a 2-year period. So this is an average amount. Now, these are just estimates. The amount could be actually way more, right? But these are the best estimates that I got with the data that was available. So we lose this amount of, meaning that Caribbean people paid $540 million more for food between 2006 and 2008. And in 2010, the food price increases mean that we paid almost $700 million more for food to import food within the region. So people had to find that money, to import more of that food. And we might say, well, oh, this is not really much of a problem. It is a problem because when prices increase, income tends to remain the same. And if income is remaining the same, then you need to reorganize your basket of goods that you are allocating expenditure to. So remember, when you have income, you distribute that income to consume like goods like, let's say, recreation, furnitures, you have food and housing, you have things like healthcare. But when the price of one of those baskets go up, you now would need to draw money away from other baskets in order to supplement, right? So during the first year of the COVID-19 pandemic now, that's just a 1-year period. We lose actually 1.09 billion US dollars in welfare, right? So which means that people paid about $1.09 billion more to import food within the Caribbean region. And welfare losses as a percentage of that specific year's expenditure was about 14% of welfare was lost, or we paid 14% more for food. We pay in 2006 to 2008, and this is just an average. So over that whole period, it could have been actually around 28%. So now between 2010 to 2011, we actually paid 13% more for food. and then to imported food, sorry. And between 2020 to 2021, that 1 year period, we paid actually 14% more to import food within the region. And again, in terms of the welfare loss, where is this welfare loss coming from? Again, you can see it's coming from cereals, which we are very dependent on, right? Remember, we saw this now that it's not very responsive. This group is not very responsive to changes in import prices, right? So even when prices increase, we still need to import huge volumes because the Caribbean region is actually having increasing in population, and then our food production is actually not really increasing proportionally to food imports and population at the same time. And also we have extra strains from tourism. Tourism plays a major role in food import demand. I recently did a study that actually showed that that tourism is positively correlated with food imports, meaning as tourist numbers increase within the region, we're actually importing more, and that's maybe to feed them, right, when they come, because domestically produced food cannot meet demands. So we can see most welfare losses, especially during the first year of the COVID-19 pandemic, came from cereals, followed by our fruits and vegetables, right? So people are paid more for these commodity groups um, over over these price shock scenarios. Um, so what are some of the what are some of the results that we found here? Well, during period of price increase, the region experienced welfare losses, and I did some welfare loss over, the last 2 decades, and we can see what the welfare loss looked like between 2006 to 2008, we had welfare loss. Then we might had some price decrease here, that the blue bar is saying where consumer actually paid less for food, so they were actually a bit better off. So all the red bars that you're seeing here is periods when consumer welfare or well-being was negatively affected. And all the blue bars here is when we would see periods when the prices of a specific, not all the food groups, but maybe a specific food group might have gone down, right? And we would have benefited here, meaning we'd have paid less to import food on average. So we can see here we have more periods of welfare loss than welfare gains, right? So just before the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic here, we see we had some welfare gains, but then we didn't have any after that. Welfare went down. So in terms of the concluding remarks, so imported meat and seafood were found to be the most responsive to price changes, while imported cereals was the least responsive to import price changes over the study period. Rising price of imported food in the Caribbean have significant welfare impacts on consumers. And you see, most of the times people would say, we would see the welfare impacts of food price increase on the general population, but there are groups of people who are disproportionately affected. I call them those who don't have a voice, like those who are more in rural communities. We call more in like the rural communities where they don't have access, to markets and stuff readily. So, they come out, they buy these expensive foods and they go back, and their incomes are already low. So they would be disproportionately affected than people who are actually living in the urban areas, right? I mean, there's research that suggests that those in rural communities actually are more food secure than those are than those that are in urban areas. But we're talking about food imports here, and the people in rural communities tend to have lower incomes already than people in urban communities. So we can see here how they will be disproportionately affected. So the first year of the COVID-19 pandemic led to approximately 1.09 billion US dollars in lost welfare, or that people paid that amount more to import food over that 1 year period. Now, this emphasizes the vulnerability of the region to external shocks, because we are so dependent now on importing the food, and food is a necessity that when the prices increase, we have no choice but to still consume. It's not like it's a gold watch or a gold chain or a luxury car. When the price increase, we don't need it, so we don't consume it. Food is something that we need to live an active and healthy life, right? It is one of the essentials of life. So when prices increase, we are going to still need to consume, so we would incur welfare loss. So policy action should be geared towards commodities that consistently have negative welfare loss, such as cereals, fruits and vegetables, and fats and oils. Fats and oils in the Caribbean region, we cook with a lot of oil, right? A lot of our food, it comes with oil. Like we know our fried chicken, we know we have something called in Trinidad doubles, and we love that. So we use oil a lot within the region, and a lot of people then have a livelihood based on imported commodities like fats and oils, because we have, as they have like doubles vendors, they depend on oil in order to make their commodity in order to make their product to sell. So increasing oil prices now would mean people would buy less from them. People buying less from them would translate to less income. Less income translate now to, having like a lower budget to allocate over different groups. So we see how it could have ripple effects throughout the economy here. So these are some of the references that I use. If you're interested in terms of the methodology, I knew I blew past that because no one is really here for the mathematical stuff.
No,
And
you're
if
not.
you are interested in reading and getting more detail, I have a detailed paper on this that has been published on this, so you can always take a read of that study. I thank you for your time, and I welcome any questions that you have right now.
Fantastic, fantastic, David. Very, very insightful, informative, and in some places startling presentation. To think that elasticity of demand, in particular with cereals, is where it's at is troubling for me, because it would seem like the Caribbean, we have a lifestyle situation that we are not prepared to sacrifice or to move away from. So I guess that's a topic for another time. So we
Yeah.
so we are running out of time. We have 15 minutes left for this webinar. So I'm going to entertain 10 minutes of questions. So the floor is now open. As a matter of fact, I think I will start with, there's a question here that is posed by, let me see, Alicia Clark first. She said, what are the necessary steps to operationalize mechanisms for shipping and cargo transport to facilitate trade and joint venture partnerships, regulatory policies, ownership, and port management? Your thoughts? So,
honestly, this seems like a question is outside of my scope of expertise. I don't know much about, no, I'm being very honest.
yeah,
I'm not that experienced in like shipping or ports or anything like that. I focus more on specifically consumer demand and responses to food imports. Although it's a very interesting question, I'm not in a position to give an answer to that question, unfortunately.
all right,
I don't want to
fantastic.
misrepresent anything.
I understand.
Apologies on that.
Maybe we can slide it over to Fuad. He may have some ideas. All right, Fuad seems to be
No, I'm with you, David.
Oh, he's here. He's here.
Yeah.
Did you hear the question, Fuad?
Yes, I think it's also in the Q&A or chat box as well from
Yes.
A Clark. Well, I think a big one is very important to understand the origination and the destination, because the regulatory structures are different. Okay, if you are talking about say Ghana to UK, the regulatory frameworks are different. Ghana to EU, Ghana to the US. So what I would suggest is that if we understand with the question, I believe understand the context very well. There are a lot of online resources that on trade portals. I think the UNCTAD has one. If the person is based in the UK, it is also good to look at the some of these trade. I'm trying to recollect the name of that site. It gives you a deeper idea of what are the requirements when you are moving goods from point A to point B. Then you know what are the documentary requirements, what are the regulations for that to take effect. But most importantly, by having access to this platform, you know what stakeholders you need to connect with when you want to build partnerships.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you for that, Fuad. And we have another question here from, where is it now? Yes, from Aaron. Are there any best, another one just came in. Are there any best practices of economic models or policies across the world that could be adapted to the Caribbean context to combat food insecurity and protect welfare?
Oh, thank you for that question. Yeah, of course. There are several best practices or economic models that can be applied. For example, we can have maybe the targeted social safety nets. We could have targeted social safety nets, and I believe this is maybe from Brazil, if I recall. And this is where we have conditional cash transfers or maybe like food vouchers tied to like education and health and nutrition that targets basically vulnerable communities. Like I spoke just now of the voices, giving voice to the voiceless, those are who are in rural communities, right? So we can maybe give in times of like price hikes, maybe you could consider giving them maybe like a specific voucher or have uh, like incentives to consume more healthy products, maybe, or maybe even having vouchers for specific only certain or necessary products like again our staples and cereals. Another one could maybe be climate smart. We could adopt like maybe climate smart agriculture within the region a bit more. In that we could maybe like invest more in like drought resistant crops, water harvesting, and also agroforestry to build resilience to climate shocks, and specifically in SIDS. We could also maybe have a food price stabilization fund within the region, which where we can create food reserve mechanisms or maybe import buffers to manage like food price volatility of staple products in the Caribbean. Those are some of there are many others, but those are the three that come to mind right now.
Okay, fantastic.
I hope that answers your question.
I think it may have. Okay, good. So we move to another question. And this is from a young lady in Indonesia. She's saying, what strategies to decrease the imported food? So I think she's basically, looking at what it is we can do to mitigate that cost of importation.
Well, as I said, is give me a second, let me gather my thoughts on this. I think what we can do to help decrease our food import bill, it has to start with producing locally. Firstly, we need to produce more products that can be produced locally. And I say that to say this, that the way that Caribbean people, at least from my experiences, the way that Caribbean people look at agriculture as a field, they look at it as backbone work, hard work, hot sun, yeah? But we need to start with changing the perception of people of what agriculture really is. Because as Fuad has showed that agriculture includes a value chain, and a lot of people don't understand that. They think that when you think about agriculture, you're just going outside and farm in the hot sun, plant some crops, and you're gonna sell it, right? And they don't understand all of the whole agribusiness network. So we need to first have education in the Caribbean. We need to educate people on why why agriculture is important. We need to what I call give agriculture some prestige. And if we give agriculture some prestige within the region, then that can help now with people producing, going and actually getting into the field, producing, and then that in itself could lead to a reduction in some of the products, not all, some of them, because things like wheat, we cannot grow wheat here, right? But we consume a lot of flour. So I'm not advocating for decreasing everything. What I'm advocating for is maybe decreasing some of the stuff that we can produce locally, like fresh fruits and vegetables. We can produce some of that locally, understand? But we import seafood. It is very much interesting because we are islands of the Caribbean region, but We import seafood from all around the world as far as Asia. We import seafood from into the Caribbean region. So we need more policies that gives that maybe gives that gives agriculture some more prestige, which would then help with increasing production, which would then translate to decreasing food imports, in my opinion. I
Great
think that is
response.
how
Thank
it's
you,
up.
David.
Yeah, Dave,
Chair?
if I can just add a bit to what David mentioned. Am I permitted?
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay, I think for me, it always has to start with a big vision, which unfortunately we lack. Okay, what did the Brazilians do? They said they want to feed the world. Brazil is no different from Nigeria.
Mhm.
Why is Brazil feeding the world and Nigeria is struggling to feed itself? So we need that bold vision by a country. Look at what Vietnam is doing in recent years. It's amazing the transformation that they have done within their food sector. So there are a lot of peers to learn from, but it starts with a bold vision. When we have the vision, then we look at, again, what do we need to do to support these farmers to enhance their production capabilities? And as David mentioned, one thing that has told developing countries, especially African and maybe Caribbean countries, has to do with the level of support that they receive from their governments in deploying import substitution strategies. In theory, it might look bad, but that is what you need to do. We are able to produce rice. Why do we need to import 70% of our rice outside Ghana or outside the region? Governments over the past years have been discouraged and sort of, I would say, one way or the other punished from subsidizing the agricultural sector in their countries. Meanwhile, the developed countries that we import from, their agricultural sector is heavily subsidized. And we need to be able to do that as well. But it all comes with the level of prioritization that we give to the agriculture. And I fully agree with David. And I think I made that point, has to do with our reframing. I know of a Brazilian farmer who is a friend here. He's based in London. He's got a helicopter in his farm in Brazil. So these are wealthy farmers, but we associate farming with poverty. And I think that is what needs to change with the reorientation. But from the government level, it needs to be that bold vision of where we want to see ourselves in the next 20 years, in the next 30 years. Then we take steps towards that journey.
Fantastic. You know, we have about 6 minutes left, but I can't help but mention the point about import substitution. I mean, many years ago in the 80s, when I was in Guyana, this might not be a story that David might remember. He's probably way too young for that. But there was an import substitution program where the government, and I'm not being political, I'm just saying that, you know, this was a fact. The Burnham government at the time, his wife Viola Burnham, she decided that they're going to ban flour. So, you know, they're trying to reduce their import bill, and they started to look at alternative ways to create a semblance of flour. So they use cassava. And I used to frown all the time because I like my roti and my doubles and all of that stuff, because some things you cannot do unless you have the original product, you know? And I think that caused problems, but they were able to reduce that import bill, you know? But maybe in some cases, a paradigm shift may be required, change the mindset, compromise your lifestyle if you need to, but nonetheless, a topic for another time.
I think, if I may just add here as well, I think one of the things that is missing in the Caribbean context is data. So we always have this problem of data is not available for us to do studies. Like this was an aggregate study I did on a macro study. This might have been better if it was a micro study, meaning based on households. And I always look to Indonesia because I have colleagues in Indonesia. And what the Indonesians have done, and I found to be very interesting, is that they created some commodities that are they class as strategic foods, right? And like one of the things is that they want to tackle stunting and in Indonesia. And what they did is, in order to increase the protein consumption within the country to 57 grams per day, is they made beef or certain commodities a strategic commodity. In that, from my understanding, what they did is that they give incentives to produce these stuff locally. And I think that we as Caribbean people and policymakers, we can take a page out of the Indonesian policy booklet, because I think that that was brilliant in what it is they did. Yeah, so I wanted to just add that also to follow up on the question that my colleague
Very
asked.
interesting. Very interesting. Well, Fuad, I'm so sorry. We need to wrap up. I've got 3 minutes to close this.
I think Patrice have a question.
We can't. We got 3 minutes to close this because I will get thrown out of this building. What that says is that we need to revisit this topic, and we will, because it's cyclical. In another few weeks, we'll come back to this, and we may put it out to the audience to see if they want you guys to come back. But for now, I need to thank the presenters. I need to thank Fuad, Abubakar, Mohammed for his excellent presentation, giving us the background of how cocoa is absolutely the commodity for our economies to build on, and in terms of the investment return that he mentioned, you know, I'm excited. I think there's a lot that we can do. So we will be pushing that agenda forward. And thank you, David, for talking about, you know, how the Caribbean imports up to 90% of its cereals, and you spoke to us about the elasticity of demand in terms of cereals and what have you, which boggles the mind, you know, and the fact that we still want meat. We want to eat lots of meat when meats are not essentially good for the planet, you know. So there's education that needs to be done there as well. So, but nonetheless, I think we had an extraordinarily productive session, and thank you for all the contributors who asked questions. And of course, we look forward to taking this to the next step. It's not just about talking here today. What are we going to do following this exercise? So what we'll be doing is we'll be sending out probably a survey to get information and to see how best we can collaborate going forward as a next step. In terms of announcements, the ACSIS World Reparations Conference will be held at the House of Lords on the 25th of September. We're bringing together a number of the global players within the reparations space to speak about how it is we can effectively make change and collaborate with our former slavers and the descendants of slavers to see how best we can, you know, make amends going forward. And then, of course, there is our flagship event, which is the ACSIS 2025 on the 21st to the 22nd of November 2025 at Queen's Gatehouse in South Kensington, London. And our next webinar, for those of you who are following the ACSIS Exchange webinar series, is going to be on July 24th. And we'll be focusing on creative and cultural industries. And that is going to be another mind-boggling experience. So with no further ado, I'd like to thank my team and thank all of you, the presenters, the audience, for your participation, and look forward to seeing you next time. Walk safe. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
All right, everyone.